A true story, she brought tea to the widowed Duke. If I were 20 years younger, I'd marry you. She never planned any of this. She never woke up one morning and thought, today, I will walk into a stranger's life and change it forever. She was just a woman trying to get through the week. And somehow, that was exactly enough. Her name was May. She was 31 years old, originally from a small town in the countryside, but she had been living in the city for almost 7 years by the time any of this happened. She worked as a part-time helper, cleaning houses, running errands, sometimes staying with elderly people who needed someone around. It was not glamorous work. Most people did not notice her when she walked into a room. But she was steady, and she was kind, and in her line of work, that mattered more than anything else. She had lost her husband 2 years before. He was a quiet man who loved gardening, and made the best rice porridge she had ever tasted. He was gone before she could properly understand what that meant. After his death, May did not fall apart. Not in a dramatic way, anyway. She just became a little more serious. A little more careful with her words. She stopped laughing as easily as she used to. People who knew her before said she looked the same, but something had gone out of her eyes. She knew it too. She just did not know how to get it back. The job posting she answered was short and simple. An elderly man, living alone in a large house outside the city, needed a live-in helper. The pay was decent. The house had a spare room. Meals were included. That was enough for May. She packed a small bag, took a 2-hour bus ride, and showed up at the address on a cold Tuesday morning, with the kind of calm that comes not from confidence, but from having nothing left to fear. The house was enormous. That was the first thing she noticed. Old stone walls, tall windows, a driveway lined with trees that had been there for 100 years at least. The second thing she noticed was how quiet it was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that builds up when no one has laughed inside a place for a long time. The man who answered the door was 73 years old. His name was Mr. Wen. He had been a well-respected businessman in his younger years, the kind of man other men straightened their backs around. But standing at his own front door in his house slippers, with his white hair uncombed and his cardigan slightly wrinkled, he looked less like a powerful man, and more like a person who had simply grown very tired. He looked at May for a moment, sizing her up the way old people sometimes do. Quickly, completely, without embarrassment. "You're younger than I expected," he said. "You look older than your photograph," she replied. He stared at her. Then, very slightly, the corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was something. The first few days were quiet and a little awkward, the way things always are when two strangers are forced to share a space. May learned the house quickly. She learned that Mr. Wen liked his breakfast at 7:30 sharp, that he could not stand the television being on during dinner, that he went to bed early but woke up in the middle of the night and sat in the library for hours. She did not ask him about these habits. She just worked around them. She also learned, without being told, that he was grieving. His wife had died 11 years ago. His only child, a son, had died before that, in an accident. There were photographs everywhere in the house, but they were all turned slightly away from where he usually sat, as if he had arranged the room specifically to avoid looking at them directly. May understood this completely. She had done the same thing with her own photographs once, back in the city apartment, when everything still hurt too much to see. On the third morning, she came downstairs very early and found him sitting in the library, staring out at the garden. He was still in his pajamas. He had not slept. She could see it in the way he held himself. That particular exhaustion that has nothing to do with the body. She did not say anything. She went to the kitchen and made tea. Not the tea that was already in his cupboard, the expensive, fancy kind that looked like it had been a gift and never touched. She made tea from the small tin she had packed in her own bag. A simple blend her mother used to make. Dried flowers, orange peel, a little cardamom. Nothing special, just something warm and real. She brought it to him on a plain tray and set it on the table beside his chair. Then she turned to go. "Sit down," he said. She sat, not because he was the employer and she the helper, but because something in his voice asked, rather than commanded, even if the words did not show it. Neither of them spoke for a while. Outside, the garden was still gray with morning fog. Mr. Wen picked up the cup, took a sip, and went quiet in a different way. A softer way, if that makes sense. Like something inside him had stopped bracing itself. "What is this?" he asked. My mother's recipe. Chamomile, orange peel, cardamom. She made it for anyone who couldn't sleep. He looked at the cup. My wife used to drink chamomile, he said. He said it the way people say things they haven't said out loud in a long time. Carefully, like the words are fragile. Then he looked at May. Really looked at her, properly, for the first time. And after a pause that lasted just a moment longer than expected, he said, If I were 20 years younger, I would seriously consider asking you to marry me. May looked back at him without blinking. Then it is very good for both of us that you are not. And Mr. Wen laughed. It was a short laugh, a little rusty, like something that had not been used in years. But it was real, and it filled the room in a way that all that expensive furniture never had. After that morning, things between them were different. Not in a big way. Nothing dramatic happened. They did not suddenly become best friends, or start taking long walks and sharing every feeling. That is not how real life works, and it was not how either of them worked. They were both private people, both careful. But the ice had cracked, just a little, and once that happens, things begin to shift on their own. He started leaving books on the hall table. Old novels mostly. He never said they were for her. He never asked if she was reading them. But she was, and they both knew it. She started making the chamomile tea every morning, not just when he could not sleep. He started coming down to the kitchen to drink it while she worked, instead of waiting in the library alone. Small things, quiet things, the kind of things that don't get written down anywhere, but that change everything. One afternoon, about 3 weeks in, they were sitting on the back porch watching the rain when he asked her about her husband. She had not expected the question. Most people did not ask. They either pretended the loss had not happened, or they offered too much sympathy in a way that felt like a performance. Mr. Wen asked simply, like he genuinely wanted to know. She told him. She told him about how her husband used to wake up early to water the plants before it got hot, how he always burned the toast but insisted he hadn't, how she found out he was sick, how it went fast, how she spent the last weeks trying to memorize the sound of his voice, because she already knew she was going to forget it. Mr. Wen listened without saying anything. No, I'm so sorry. No, at least he isn't suffering. Just silence, which was the right thing to offer. When she was finished, he said quietly, I lost my son before my wife, and I always felt that was the wrong order. Parents are not supposed to outlive their children. He looked out at the rain. I never said that to anyone before. It sounds selfish. It doesn't, May said. No, it sounds true, and true things are never selfish. He did not reply, but when they went back inside, he did not turn away from the photographs quite so carefully as usual. The trouble came about 6 weeks after she arrived. Mr. Wen's nephew, a man in his 50s named Mr. Bo, showed up unannounced one Saturday afternoon with his wife. They were polished and well-dressed, and smiled a lot in that way that doesn't quite reach the eyes. May recognized the type immediately. She had worked in enough wealthy households to know. Mr. Bo was pleasant to his uncle, attentive in a practiced way. But when he found a moment alone with May in the kitchen, his voice changed. He told her, in the most reasonable tone he could manage, that he was a little concerned about her closeness with his uncle. That it was unprofessional. That perhaps she would be more comfortable working somewhere else, and he could arrange a reference. May poured herself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and said, I appreciate your concern. I'll let Mr. Wen know you spoke with me. Mr. Bo's smile tightened. That's not necessary. I think it is, she said, and walked out. That evening, she told Mr. Wen exactly what had been said. She did not dress it up or make it more dramatic. She just told him the truth and said she wanted him to know. He was quiet for a long time. Then he called his lawyer. May did not know the details of what was arranged. She did not ask. But within a week, she had a proper employment contract, one that gave her stability and clear terms, and Mr. Bo did not visit again for a very long time. Mr. Wen never mentioned it directly. He just said, one evening, I am old, not helpless. There is a difference. I know, she said. Good, he said, and went back to his book. The months moved the way good months do, without you noticing until they're already behind you. Autumn came. The garden turned gold and then brown. May learned that Mr. Wen used to grow tomatoes himself, before his knees made it impossible. She started growing them for him in the small raised bed near the kitchen window. He pretended not to care. She caught him checking on the plants one afternoon, when he thought she was busy inside. He started sleeping better. Not perfectly. He was still awake some nights, still sat in the library in the dark, but there were mornings when he came down to breakfast with the look of a man who had actually rested, and those mornings felt like small victories. He asked her once during a quiet evening if she ever thought about going back to the city, starting something new. She said she thought about it sometimes, but that she wasn't in a hurry. She said she found it easier to think about the future when she was somewhere that felt settled. He nodded slowly. "This house has not felt settled in a long time," he said. "It does now. That is your doing." "It's the tea," she said. He laughed. It came easier now, less rusty. By the second winter, his health had begun to slow. Nothing sudden, nothing dramatic. Just the natural way a person starts to tire when they have been carrying the weight of a long life for many decades. He moved a little slower. He needed help with things he had previously refused help with. He accepted this without too much complaint, which surprised her, until she realized it was because he trusted her. He had not trusted easily or often, but he trusted her. She read to him in the evenings, when his eyes grew too tired for books. She cooked the foods he asked for, even the ones that took time. She sat with him through the difficult nights, and did not try to fill the silence with words, when silence was what was needed. She had learned, through her own grief, that presence matters more than comfort. That simply not leaving is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do. He died on a Thursday, in February, when the garden outside was covered in frost. It was gentle, as these things go. The doctor said he had been at peace in his final days, and May believed it, because she had been there and had seen it herself. After the arrangements were handled, his lawyer contacted her. Mr. Wen had left her a portion of money in his will, enough to help her start fresh if she chose to, and with it, a handwritten letter. The paper was old and the handwriting was slow and careful, like he had thought about every word. The letter said, "You reminded this house how to be warm again. I do not think you knew you were doing it. That is the best way to do a thing. Thank you for the tea, and for everything that came with it." When May read it 3 times, standing in the hallway of that big, quiet house. Then she folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of her coat. She went back to her hometown in the spring. She found a small place near the market, with a narrow little yard where she planted chamomile and a few tomato seedlings. She took work at a local care home, sitting with elderly residents, reading to them, making tea. Her supervisor there said she had a gift for being present with people who were frightened or alone. May did not think of it as a gift. She thought of it as something she had learned. She kept Mr. Wen's letter in a frame on the kitchen windowsill, not out of sadness, out of something more like gratitude. For him, yes, but also for what the whole experience had quietly given back to her. She had arrived at that house empty in some important way. She had left it more full. She had not gone looking for any of it. She had only shown up on a cold Tuesday morning, carrying a bag and a small tin of her mother's tea blend, ready to do a job, and somehow, without planning it, she had walked into something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. 2 people who had both lost their way, finding something like warmth in the same room at the same time. Not a love story. Not the kind they make films about anyway. Something quieter than that. Something more real. The kind of story that happens all the time, and almost never gets told. 2 ordinary people who were honest with each other, when it would have been easier to stay polite, and who were changed, gently and permanently, because of it. And it all started with a cup of tea.